between 30 to 60 billion dollars, which is the U.S. federal government. U.S. federal government invests tremendously in deep tech and dual use startups. And they do it for a variety of reasons, which I guess we can tackle under the through the presentation. A little bit personally background about me: married 6 years. Actually, this tonight was 7 years ago. Was the time where my wife and I got back together after a 5-year break. So, and now we have 3 beautiful children. So that's on a personal note. So we're celebrating our anniversary by having this. On top of that, in Eagle Point Funding, we're an extension of a bigger organization that includes 4 different subdivisions that all focus on the world of non-dilutive funding, which is a complementary and powerful field in the world of deep tech because along with VCs, which also invest in deep tech, you have the U.S. federal government and other governments. And what does that actually include? Annually, I mentioned 30 to 60 billion dollars. That's what's available for industry. But the U.S. federal government invests a tremendous amount of money in federal research and development dollars. And that number in 2020 is $161.5 billion, which is split between what goes to federal research labs, universities and academic institutions, as well as nonprofit research and development. And then the federal agencies themselves have an internal budget, which they invest in. Of course, the 30 to $60 billion, which is available for the private sector. Now, and on top of that, there's an additional boost that was given, obviously, with the stimulus fund, which we know. The reason I bring this up is because as the market is trying to find some sort of balance right now, I know investors, and we'll hear about this a little bit later from the 2 talented investors we have on the panel, about what's going on in the private sector, in private sector investments. But the federal government has also rallied and taken a big role through the stimulus package. The different types of investments vary between small business-centric investments and investments that can go to small or big businesses. Where the small business-centric ones are called SBIR, or Small Business Innovation Research Grants, which are phased funding typically, and they allow for initial investments of anywhere between $50,000 to $250,000 for phase 1. Then, assuming you reach a milestone, they make a bigger investment of typically around $1 million per, though it can be up to $2.5 million per investment. And then some programs offer commercialization assistance, like Air Force Ventures program, which offers up to $15 million of commercialization assistance, which is in order to rally into the end goal of a lot of these programs, which is business to government relationships, where you've developed a technology and that technology may or may not have a dual use purpose. And then you might be able to snag at the end a federal customer, which is obviously a tier 1 client. As opposed to that, there's the broad agency announcement system, which are for big and small business, where it's kind of a competition, let the best tech win. And a lot of the programs are even open to foreign companies competing in the space, as long as their technology is competitive. And this is continuous funding. They don't stagger the grants. They just give you 2 or 3 year grant, and that means that the ceilings on these grants can be in excess of tens of millions of dollars. When we talk about the quality of this investment, it's what's called non-dilutive investment, which means that it's essentially free money. And this is why it goes so well with venture money. When you get a venture capital and you're looking of where to put your best bets, it could be that by putting an emphasis to not only open up a new market, a federal market, but also to snag federal research dollars. And the reason the government does this is for one of 2 primary reasons, both of which I kind of hinted to. One is you're developing deep technologies, and there's over 26 federal agencies, and they are all Fortune 500 and larger organizations, and they have a tremendous amount of challenges. And it could be that the private sector, and with the many innovations that are coming out of the private sector, could be offering solutions to federal challenges that they're experiencing. The other reason that the federal government might be making an investment is for seed money, which is a way to stimulate the economy. Thanks for the markings on the on the screen, whoever is doing their drawings. That is a whole different reason where the federal government is investing in order to give a boost. And that's what we see in the stimulus fund, but it's relevant every single year where the federal government views themselves as an investment wing, which is there to complement the types of research that maybe are not getting the same level of attention from the VC. So how does it work? Typically, in the first case scenario, there is a challenge that, let's say the Department of Army has an issue where they're not getting enough medical supplies to soldiers that are stationed abroad, and so they have to find out, some sort of R&D solution to it. So come a bunch of companies and they solicit, and maybe it's a drone company that does drone delivery, it's another company that is logistics AI platform, and it enables it to happen quicker. And then the federal government selects one or many of these companies to make an investment in. They see how you perform on the R&D, and then if you do a good job, they might come knocking on the door and ask to become a tier 1 client. And there are actually programs today that have this built in, where you don't have to have it as a separate, the sole source contract with the federal agency that falls on, but rather they have it built in. And these programs such as Excerpt or AFWorks, may or may not have heard of them, but they're very, very, very easy to work with. AFWorks is one of them. They pay very quickly, within 60 days of a submission. They offer assistance in one of two forms, a track 1 or track 2. The attractive element here is that if you make it into the second track, you are essentially guaranteed a sole source contract, which is like a paying client, with a United States Air Force client. And what's amazing about this is we think of the Air Force and maybe we think of things that fly and nothing else, but really the US Air Force is a tremendously vast organization with a very varied and dynamic type of technological solutions that they're looking for. This program in particular opens later on this month. The other type of investment, which is what I mentioned before, is the seed money for the private sector, where there's a mixture of altruistic as well as capitalistic interest here for the federal government. The altruistic motives are job creation, creating great technology for the people of the United States and for the world, and also to promote the U.S. on a global platform. Capitalistically, they have a similar motivation because they actually see $2.30 for every dollar they invest in you, because ultimately you're generating business, businesses pay taxes, and it pays back into the system. So it's a win-win for